Welcome to 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. I am your host, Brian McFadden. I have an extra special guest this week. I get to return the favor. So I have been a weekly guest on the 49ers Rush podcast for what I think is like the last 2 months. But this time, I get to bring my boy John Chapman on. John, how you doing today, dude?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm so excited about this because, one, I'm just a big fan of what you do. So anything you're into,
thanks.
Brian, I'm a big supporter. So excited to be here. It's nice being on the other side for a change. Just kind of, relax the shoulders a little bit.
Yep.
But so pumped to talk football for 30 minutes with you, bud.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to have you on. I was telling you about the show. I mentioned a lot of your regular listeners actually do tune in for this. So shout out to the 49ers faithful that make sure to listen to John. As always, you can catch us Thursdays in his show much more frequently than that. But John, we jump right into the football talk here. And how we're going to do it is we're just going to take some turns asking questions. You've won the coin toss. Congratulations. So before we get started, you get to choose. Do you want to ask the first question? Or do you want to receive the first question?
I'll throw it to you. I'll let you get it started because I got some big hitters. I got two big ones and then a couple, extra ones. We'll see how time goes. But I got two big ones I want to get to. So.
Okay, awesome. So if you're watching on YouTube, we have a visual timer, finally. So instead of those chimes, you will see the actual 30 minutes countdown. We will stop at 15 minutes for a brief halftime break. And our timer just went off. I hope that's not going to be an issue. Our producer, Anthony, running the timer. That's why we pay him the big bucks. And then, as always, once 30 minutes are up, John, we have to stop talking. So let's go ahead and get this party started. 30 minutes of football with Legit Football starts now. So, John, we knew that this was going to be a 49ers-centric podcast. So, obviously, I have to start with something related to that. But it's also timely. It was actually one of the stories we had in today's Legit Football newsletter. And that has to do with Jimmy G. I know on your show we've talked about him at multiple episodes that I've been on, but I want to ask a specific question related to Jimmy Garoppolo. A lot of talk about, is he going to be traded? Where's he going to go? What team he's going to play for? But the news that we had today was that the Seahawks are doing their due diligence on him, but that the only way that they would actually be able to acquire him is through a release. So my question to you, John, is, as someone who's plugged into the 49ers, would they ever actually release Jimmy G? Is that something that's a real possibility?
There's really two ways to look at this, because if you're just looking at this from like, okay, a 49ers centric, how do we build our roster, our cap, and, build this roster for the future? You could argue that it makes sense to release Jimmy G, move on, get all that cap, because, one of the big differences between Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo's money's not guaranteed. Only $4 million is. So theoretically, the 49ers could release them, wash their hands, get all that cap money back, use that for Bosa in the future, Debo in the future, whatever. But you take out the reality of the situation and the fact that Kyle Shanahan has only beaten the Seattle Seahawks 3 times, really the 49ers in general, in the past decade. They've only beat the Seattle Seahawks 3 times in the past decade. So why in the world would you walk away and release a quarterback and bail out a team in disarray that has completely destroyed you for the past 10 years? That is why I do not think Kyle Shanahan, who's also very, very stubborn, I don't think there's a chance the 49ers release Garoppolo. I just don't see it. I really, really don't see it.
Do you think there's a scenario where they would be forced to when it comes to the Debo negotiations? So, we know that they need to get that new contract done probably before training camp, which is coming up here maybe in just a couple weeks. Will there be a scenario where they, as a means to find additional money, do you think that is a possibility?
No, I've said this repeatedly. The Debo deal can get done right now, no issues. Like the Garoppolo contract does not affect the Debo deal whatsoever. What it does affect is if you're going to have to front load or back load the Nick Bosa deal next year. That's where it comes into effect, because Debo's going to get signed here in about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks when they report to camp. That's when the 49ers do all their deals. If you look at, George Kittle, Fred Warner, they report to camp, then they get their deal. That's just the way the 49ers do business. But again, Debo's right at about $4.5 million against the cap this year. You'll be able to extend him and not have an issue with adding more pressure to the cap. They have about $5 million in change. So, like, literally, whenever they redid the Fred Warner deal, and that was like the COVID year and all the craziness and whatever
Right.
else. They actually lowered his cap number when they did the extension. So Jimmy Garoppolo contract does not affect Debo, will affect the way in which Nick Bosa's contract next year will be structured, though.
So I know where you personally have been planting your flag where Jimmy's going to end up, but I'm going to ask the question anyway for our listeners. Where do you see Jimmy G playing if it's not for the 49ers in 2022?
If it's a trade, and I think it will be, there's one more big hurdle that's going to go down maybe today, and that's Deshaun Watson gets suspended for a year. I think that is a perfect location for him. They have so much salary cap space. Niners will have to eat some of that for sure, but it just makes too much sense. Cleveland has a win now type roster. It's a perfect fit for Jimmy Garoppolo. Strong running game, strong line, strong defense, very similar system with Kevin Stefanski.
Yep.
It just makes too much sense. I've been harping on that since, for a long time, this whole entire offseason. But, it seemed like when they got Deshaun Watson, that was a loss and I was incorrect. But I still think that there's a possibility. Texans, a little bit of a dark horse. And if neither one of those teams, come up for Jimmy, then I think he stays on the 49ers roster. And if, Daniel Jones doesn't pan out or somebody gets injured or something like that, that's when that trade would take place.
The one last thing I'll mention about Jimmy, also in the story in the Legit Football newsletter this morning, a dark horse candidate that I had not yet heard was the Dolphins. And obviously there's some familiarity there with Mike McDaniel as the new head coach, former OC for the 49ers. Is that something, and I'm a Dolphins fan, but I'm not going to comment on this, from you on the 49ers side, is that something that could realistically happen?
Yes and no. The only way that it could happen is if Tua struggles out the gate. That's not a trade that would take place
a mid-season type thing. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Trading, you're talking, the Halloween trading deadline, something like that. Tua's injured or just doesn't cut it with all those weapons. They want to make the playoffs now. They kind of push their chips in. Yeah. Mike McDaniel makes sense. They could go get them. But again, that would not be a trade. And again, these are more reasons why there's no way in hell the 49ers are going to release them. There's no way. Because there's 20 different scenarios where you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And
there's
teams will want Jimmy.
Here. Yeah.
And if you do release him, he's walking to Seattle and signing next day, and he's going to be playing for free in Seattle. You're paying him to pay for a division rival?
To play you twice because he's instantly an upgrade over that quarterback room. So he's going to be starting week one. So now you have to face him. He knows your offense. He's been there throughout the coaching for the last few years. Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. I don't see an advantage to them releasing him. So let's turn it over to you. You have the ball. You may ask the next question.
All right. This is one of the topics that I love. I most of my work that I do and kind of how I got started in the NFL was covering the draft. I love the draft, and I love the premium stock or cash or draft picks that are spent on certain positions. So for the longest time, the NFL has kind of operated under this construct that you have quarterbacks first, okay? Then you have pass rushers second. And then in that third tier, you had cornerbacks, you had offensive tackles, and wide receivers. My question to you, Brian, where in the world do wide receivers fit now on the NFL valued position kind of tiers? Because I don't think it's where it has been. This year, we've seen a drastic change in the money and the draft capital that's been spent on the wide receiver position. So my question to you is, where do we put the wide receiver position now? Where does it rank?
That's actually a great question, and I think it's fluid for a few reasons. One, this is a passing league. It has been for many years. You cannot really be successful long-term. And we've seen the Titans with Derrick Henry. We've seen the Browns have a good running game. Obviously, the 49ers. But the most successful teams in this league have been, you think about the Chiefs, the Bucks with Brady, have been very much pass-heavy teams, which means you need multiple wide receivers more than ever before. You need to be able to go 4 wide, 5 wide, which by
Kingsbury is so happy with this conversation, by the way.
Well, I've got my own thoughts on Kingsbury. I've shared them on your show. I'm not a fan of that because I don't think he does it right, but he's on to at least the concept of the spread offense. We've seen it start to infiltrate the NFL from the college ranks actually for many, many years now, but that really boosts the overall value of the wide receiver position. The interesting question is, how valuable is the top of the wide receiver position? Because we know depth is. And we've actually seen these really deep wide receiver classes lately because I think college kids are starting to see, okay, I have a good chance if I'm able to be a solid wide receiver in the college ranks, I have a good chance of being on an NFL roster because they need 3, 4, 5 wide receivers and more on their depth chart. But
it
now
didn't used to be that way.
No, not
it
at all.
It used to be, man, if you want to make it to the NFL, you got to play corner.
Correct.
You go to the defensive side of the ball. Now,
right. Now it's because it used to be like, single back, 2 tight end, 2 running back, and 2 wide receiver, right? It's so you've got kind of these more power and pro formations, whereas now it's like, no, we're going to be in shotgun 65% of the time. We need to have the fullback is only a handful of teams even use fullbacks these days, and tight ends are wide receivers. So being able to be a great pass catcher really elevates that value. But the bigger question with regards to this season is how valuable is the very, very top? And I think we're going to start to see that answer some because you've seen left and right big deals and big trades happen. A.J. Brown to the Eagles, obviously Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins. There's been the whole Debo drama. Washington just re-signed McLaurin. DK Metcalf still hasn't been re-signed, but he's either going to get re-signed or maybe even find on another team. So these really high-end elite wide receivers are getting paid or getting dealt. So with all this new depth at receiver, our team's going to start to say, and this is essentially what the Titans did. They're like, we'd rather go for a Treylon Burks. We'd rather not pay A.J. Brown the, $25 million that he's seeking and go out and get a guy who has a similar profile. Does that work? Does Burks come in? Can you just replace a guy like an A.J. Brown? Is it that easy to find depth?
We're going to find out, aren't we?
We're going to find out, right? So I think this year, and why I love that question, John, is going to be very valuable to determine that because the wide receiver position is valuable, yes, but how valuable is the very top of the list? I actually, kind of related to the same question, I don't think teams are valuing corner enough these days. I don't think that I'm glad that Sauce Gardner was taken high. Because I think more teams should be doing that. Not enough teams value. I mean, when's the last time, if ever, that a corner was taken number 1, right? How many teams would take Jalen Ramsey number 1 overall if they were getting him coming out of Florida State? So I don't think, especially with the proliferation of wide receiver, there's not enough attention being spent on high-end defensive backs. And part of that is the talent is not there. You don't see a lot of elite corners. But I think the college kids, they see, okay, wide receivers where I'm going to make my money. I'm going to go that direction. So I think this will be a pivotal year to kind of see where that ends up.
Okay, so I want to put your feet to the fire here, okay? Which position, and we'll go top down. And so I want to see where they fit for you. Which one's more important in the NFL currently, or valued? Let's do valued most. Quarterback or wide receiver? That's an easy one.
So what the NFL values or what I think should be valued?
What the NFL values.
Okay, quarterback.
Okay.
And quarterback for me too, just so everybody's clear.
Edge rusher.
Yeah. And
edge rusher or wide receiver.
Right now, NFL edge rusher.
Okay. Offensive tackle or wide receiver.
I think we're seeing wide receiver now. I think the NFL's valuing wide receiver above tackle.
Okay, now you're a cornerback guy, so cornerback or wide receiver?
Well, the NFL is definitely valuing wide receiver.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's right below, and just barely below that edge rusher. Because golly, man, the money that is being doled out, because you have like 4 to 5 edge rushers that get top tier money. You've got like 10 to 12 wide receivers getting top tier money.
Mm-hmm. And you're seeing guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase who have already proven themselves in just a short time in the league. You're seeing more of these dominant wide receivers. So that'll be interesting to track down the road when those guys, when it comes time for them to get paid, if Tyreek doesn't do well in Miami, if A.J. Brown falters in Philadelphia, if Debo gets injured, these are the things that could completely impact the next round of wide receivers who are going to get paid. Be very curious to see where the NFL ends up on that.
I like it. All right.
Yeah.
Your turn. Bring it to me.
So we got 3 minutes left. This is a good 3-minute question because I don't think you'll need more than 3 minutes to answer this. But I believe it was Colin Cowherd and Mike Silver mentioned that you know where this is going. The 49ers coaches needed to, and this was in Legit Football yesterday, needed to retrain Trey Lance on his throwing motion because, quote, he had arm fatigue, the way he was throwing the ball, and the 49ers were worried about him over the course of a 17-game season. You're plugged into San Francisco. Is this just a bunch of BS? Like, where do you fall on this?
100% BS. 100%.
So where did this come from? Like, what advantage is this just for
sources that Mike's, and I love Mike Silver. I think he does great work. Doesn't mean I agree with him all the time, but he talks about how his sources in the organization, his sources told him last year, and he was adamant, Mac Jones at 3. And anybody that questioned that, he goes on his blocking sprees and everything else, and just, I have better sources, I know whatever. That's usually the route he goes. He did the same thing last year with Mac Jones at 3. Wasn't the case. He did the same thing this year with the arm fatigue. When Kyle Shanahan was asked about the throwing motion, he literally said, no, we're not changing it. It's fine. There's no issues with it. And whenever another person inside the 49ers staff was asked about arm fatigue, he said, what the hell is that? This is not...
So who's leaking that? This has to come, even if it's a bad source, somebody is leaking this, and why would they do that?
If there's anybody that has been adamant about Trey Lance and wanting Mac Jones, it's Rich Scangrello, who was the quarterbacks coach, failed offensive coordinator for Denver, failed quarterbacks coach for the Eagles. Shanahan brought him back. Now he's an OC at the college level, I think Kentucky. He's been very adamant. He really, really wanted Mac Jones, and there's a reason why he's gone. The 49ers let him go. It's so much negativity in the press. Seems to all be trafficked back to him. Now, that's conjecture on my point. That I'm assuming that's where it's coming from, because the 49ers don't leak. And anytime something like that happens and, people start saying this or that, it's always wrong. George Kittle's going to be traded. Debo's going to be traded. All these different things. That's not who the 49ers are. Go back to the Titans. And I know we're up against the clock here. Vrabel said, if A.J. Brown gets traded, I will no longer be the coach of this team. What happened a month later? He got traded. He's still the coach of this team. So there are people out there that are going to do their PR spins and all that
Pete
stuff.
Carroll with Russ. We have no intention. No intention of trading Russell Wilson.
Later.
Well, he's a Bronco now guy. So.
The 49ers never said anything about any of this stuff. And again, I've watched every throw that Trey Lance has ever attempted, and that throw motion has not changed. So
you think it's just a disgruntled former employee who is just
it's off-season BS title lines, and I hate that it's like that, but that's just the way it is.
Welcome to July in the NFL. All right, that is our halftime sound. I love that we have a visual timer now. Thank you to our producer, Anthony.
I love this.
That I can actually see, because the previous 3 episodes, John, we've been just kind of guessing when it's going to end. So this makes it a lot easier. So quickly for halftime, for those of you who don't know, Legit Football is your free daily NFL newsletter. Get caught up in the NFL in just 5 minutes a day. Go to legitfootball.com, hit join, enter your email address, and just skim it. Just read the headlines if you want, but you'll be smarter, and with fantasy drafts coming up, you'll be better prepared to kind of face the NFL. I'm going to let John go ahead and tell you where he can find his stuff.
Yeah, 49ers Rush. Anywhere you watch, listen, download 49ers Rush, that's where you're going to find us. YouTube's probably the best place because we do a lot of film. We have access to the All 22 and all that stuff. And I'm a former coach. And so what my whole philosophy is on this podcast, which, man, Brian, we're approaching episode 600. I think our next episode is 596. Okay. The whole philosophy is building a community and educating fans so that their time spent watching the 49ers or NFL is more enjoyable. Very, very sensitive. Very, very simple. Positive. We don't do clickbait type stuff, if you can tell from our last segment. But yeah, we go through the scheme. We go through the plays, the defensive schemes, blocking schemes, and try to educate and show.
You go through the whole roster. You got like a roster countdown of every single player on the roster. That's phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, we're currently doing our 90-man roster preview where we do one episode for all 90 players. I think we're on 35. We're going to finish by the time training camp starts. We're doing 2 a day. But yeah, we want people to be educated and understand the 49ers. That's the whole goal.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the 49ers, or the NFC West, or just good NFL content, make sure to check out 49ers Rush, either as a podcast or on YouTube. As I mentioned to start the show, I am a regular guest. I'm on there every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. So if you just want to kind of catch me on there, that's the time to do it. But he puts out lots of great content. Did you give yourself a halftime speech, John? Are you ready to go out there and face the second half here?
Let's go. We will not be defeated.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and start the second half. I asked the Trey Lance arm fatigue question, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, John. You have the ball. Ask away.
All right. Speaking of not being beaten, because I'm going to be really honest with you. If I could pick any head coach in the NFL, whether it's, head coach power rankings or coach to lead your team, and I love Kyle Shanahan. He's going to be top 5 for me, but he's not my number 1. My number 1 is Mike Tomlin. Tell me I am crazy. I hate the Steelers. I can't stand them. I love me some Mike Tomlin. Never had a losing season in 15 years. Am I crazy?
I don't think that's crazy. I don't know that I would pick him first, but you can't argue. And I'll tell you who I'll pick first after I kind of go on a defense of your Tomlin pick. It doesn't matter the roster he's had. It doesn't matter the quarterback he's had, both, with and without Ben Roethlisberger, and then crappy Ben Roethlisberger, which is what we got for like the last 3 to 4 seasons. That's what coaching can do. A good coach can take a bad roster and find ways to make them winners, find ways to make them playoff contenders, find ways to not have a losing record. That's insane that a coach has been able to take an NFL team. Bill Belichick can't say that, right? The guy with, 7 Super Bowl rings, more if you count his time with the Giants, cannot say that he's never had a losing season. He went 7-9 the first year without Tom Brady. But Mike Tomlin has been able to stay there, and I'm not high on the Steelers, but I'm not going to bet them to have a less than 50-50 record this year, or at least like 9-8. And it's completely due to his ability as a coach. And you and I did power ranking show, and I've mentioned a few other things where I put a lot of stock in head coaching. I actually ranked the Falcons higher and the Panthers lower. This is before the Mayfield trade, because I'm higher on Arthur Smith and lower on Matt Rule. So I just believe that coaching can make a huge difference. And Tomlin is kind of the epitome of that. No matter what roster you've given him over 2 decades, this guy is going to get you at bare minimum in a highly competitive National Football League, a 500 record. That's phenomenal. Who I would choose, go ahead, John, mention your Tomlin comments and I'll give you my
I'm just going to say what he's been able to do with the ghost or the dead body of Ben Roethlisberger the past 2 years is incredible to me, and as equally impressive as what he's done with Super Bowl wins, with his Super Bowl win. He won one. That's the only reason why I would have him a little bit lower. Like, I get that criticism, but golly, so consistent. Plus, he can make special teams tackles, so that's going to go in the positive for me as well. But I just love Mike Tomlin, man. He's one of those guys that, man, I wish he could coach one of my kids just because of how positive he is.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of coaches that are just like sleazeballs.
Yeah, he cares about the players. You can tell he actually cares about these as human beings, which is unfortunately not always something that can be said.
Right. Who's your guy? Who's your guy?
So it depends on if we're talking about 10 to 20 years. Like, if I'm picking my coach for the future, probably wouldn't be this guy. But if I'm picking a coach that I want for the next 5 years, it's got to be Andy Reid. This is a guy who's had success and gone to Super Bowls with multiple teams, and has had a guy like Alex Smith show success and Donovan McNabb show success. And of course, when he finally gets a generational quarterback with Mahomes, they go on a dominant run with the Chiefs team, which is still one of the best in the NFL. But if I'm talking about longer term, it's Tomlin or John Harbaugh. Harbaugh is another one of those that's just... I
like Harbaugh.
And it helps that, honestly, the Ravens as an organization and the Steelers as an organization, it's just, they just do things right. There's some organizations that are just a mess. Houston comes to mind, Jacksonville, where there's just like, they can't seem to do anything right. And then there's organizations which it doesn't matter who the quarterback is or what the team looks like. You just know, look at what the Ravens had to face from an injury standpoint. They lost basically anyone that was of import last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and they were still competing for a playoff spot towards the end of the season. That's good coaching. So that's why you see guys like Harbaugh, you see guys like Tomlin, you see what they can do regardless of their surroundings. I want a guy like that running my team. For a younger coach who hasn't been in, I'm actually a big Vrabel fan. I think this is going to be a huge test for him. Like, this is basically, we talked about this earlier with regards to the whole valuing a top-end wide receiver, but it's going to be valuing Derrick Henry is finally, I think, showing some wear and tear in those tires as he gets 400-plus carries a year, and he missed a good chunk of last year. You don't have that high-end wide receiver. Tannehill, as a Dolphins fan, has shown he's the kind of quarterback that without those super elite pieces around him, he's not going to carry your team. So this is going to be a big test for Vrabel. I'm not high on the Titans, but I didn't predict the Titans to win the AFC last year. I had the number 1 seed, and they were right there. So I like that as far as kind of solid. Now, look, right behind them, you got Shanahan, you got McVay. But I just like what Vrabel has been able to do with lesser rosters.
No, I like it. No issues there. No issues there at all.
All right, so I'm going to finally ask you a non-Niners related question.
Let's go.
So Jalen Hurts. Clear fantasy studies on one of my dynasty leagues. He helped me get to the championship game last year. I'm not completely sold, but the Eagles have done a lot as a roster this offseason. We mentioned A.J. Brown. They added James Bradbury, right? They had a great draft, got Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis up front. They've got a top, at least 10, maybe top 5 offensive line. And you have Devontae Smith going to year 2. You've got a lot of pieces around him. Not a Nick Sirianni fan, but if we're just talking about Jalen Hurts, my question to you, will he be the clear and undisputed quarterback for the Eagles to start the 2023 offseason, or do we think that Philly's going to be looking to replace him next year?
I think there's a big issue with, I'm not sure the Eagles have bought in either. You know, they traded out of the first round. They had 3 first-round picks this year. Right. They backed out with the Saints, which I thought they fleeced the Saints. And so now the Eagles have 2 first-round picks next year. It's supposed to be a pretty heavy quarterback class. Right. And I kind of love the way that they have done this, is because guess what? If he goes out and plays and does what, you know, they are hoping he can do, then you're fine. And if he doesn't, then guess what? They're fine as well. You're going to see kind of a Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance situation if he's just average this year.
Right.
So I do believe Jalen Hurts will start week 1 of the 2023 season, probably like the first month or so, because they have a deep roster, kind of an aging roster as well, to where their defense, they're going to be competitive in one of the worst divisions in football. Every single year they are, but I think that they've gotten better. I think they're the best roster in the NFC East. And I do think Jalen Hurts will be the guy for at least a year and a half. Now, I do not believe he will be the starting quarterback in 2024. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Because you're saying he's going to start, but they're going to have the contingency plan in place. That's kind of what I was getting at. So he may be starting, but he's not undisputed. In the scenario you're describing, he is not the undisputed starter where they're like, this is our guy. We're not trying to have another plan.
Now, time out real quick. I will say this. Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner Minshew. Yeah.
And I really want the 49ers to trade for him so freaking bad. Once Jimmy gets placed wherever, I would trade a 3rd-round pick for Gardner Minshew.
Send Jimmy to Philly.
Happy.
Jimmy G to Philly and get Gardner Minshew back.
I'd be so happy for that, but that's just me.
Yeah, I'm kind of of the same mind. The Dolphins have done the same thing with Tua. The Dolphins have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds, including 2 first, the 49ers first next year. So I think it's the same idea. Like, if Tua is not the answer with all they've done around him, they've got the ammunition to make a play at another quarterback.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed with you there.
All right, now it's my turn, right?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. I want to know your opinion. What is the worst division in football?
I'm still going to have to go with the NFC East.
NFC East?
Yeah, with maybe the AFC South in contention.
That was my number 1 for worst.
Yeah, I have the Colts winning that division. While I don't have the Titans in the playoffs, I think I do believe Vrabel is in that Tomlin mold, so I think the Titans will be competitive. I think the Jaguars will be better under Doug Peterson, and I think the Texans are not a complete dumpster fire. They're just like a moderate dumpster fire. And with Lovie Smith, I do think they'll be competitive as well, but not high in the Commanders with Wentz. I think I was picking them to win the NFC East last year, and they completely fell off. And definitely, I think Dable has good long-term prospects, as long as Daniel Jones is the quarterback, I'm not high in the mirror. So I just think it's more.
Why would they stay with him?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, why? I mean, but hey, they did not pick up his 5th-year option. So they, even more so than the Dolphins and the Eagles, they have basically said, this is your year, Danny. I like to call him Danny Duds. If you do not produce to a level that we're happy with, and Dable is taking over. This isn't his hand-picked quarterback. He's going to want a guy that he believes in. I think the Giants won't have a very good record. I think they'll be in a conversation for one of these top quarterbacks. And I think that's it. If we're measuring the talent level right now, I'd put the NFC East ahead of the AFC South. But it's more just like the arrows are slightly up for Jacksonville and Houston, where to me the arrows are down for the Giants and the Commanders. And
I like that.
The arrows down for Dallas because they lost a lot of talent. I still think Dallas is a playoff team before you guys go crazy on me. But I think the arrow's down because they lost a lot of talent with Amari Cooper, with Randy Gregory, Lyle Collins, Connor Williams. They just lost some really corner starting pieces. And they didn't do a lot of backfill it. They've still got Micah Parsons. They're great. So I think I'm going to stick with my answer. I think NFC East worst, AFC South maybe a nudge above. What about you?
See, I had AFC South last and then NFC South, who you didn't even bring up, which is interesting because and here's kind of my philosophy, right? Each division's got 4 teams. Whichever divisions have 2 terrible teams, that kind of qualifies them. And I don't think there's any team worse than Atlanta right now. And Carolina.
And you and I differ on Atlanta. Yeah. We've had this. Yeah, that's one of the few things we differ on. From a talent perspective, yeah, I agree with you. But I just kind of I don't know. I have a feeling that Atlanta's going to be better than people think. And now that the Panthers have added Mayfield, I don't think he turns them into a playoff contender. But they're going to be a little bit spicier. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Right. 3 of those were in the first 3 weeks of the season. But that was with Sam Darnold. I mean, if CMC can stay healthy, you still have DJ Moore, who I think is a top 10 wide receiver. You got Brian Burns as a top edge rusher. You've got Jeremy Chin as the top safety. Shaq Thompson had a fantastic
They got the corners. They got all the corners. I'll say that.
That's right. So you've got enough talent that with better quarterback play, you should at least kind of flirt with league average. So that's my thing with the NFC South. The Saints will be competitive, and then you still have the Bucs. So it's like they're just so top heavy. So I'm going to stick to my answer, NFC East. Sorry for all the Eagles and Giants fans out there.
No worries.
So here's my question for you. We got about 3.5 minutes left for those that are listening and not watching. I know that you and I are both big on the Chargers this year. Justin Herbert going into year 3. I'm just going to ask you a pointed question, John. Will Justin Herbert win the MVP in 2022?
His numbers are always good. Okay, to win the MVP, you need several things. You've got to have one of the top kind of, contending teams in the NFL, which I think they're going to have. You've got to have your big-time game moments, which last year he had 5 fourth-quarter comebacks, 5 game-winning drives. 38 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, insane. He's got to get those turnover numbers down. That's a big problem with, as long as Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are in the league, they just don't put the ball in risky places.
Right.
So I want to say yes. I really do. I love the Chargers. I really, really do. I love watching them play. I love their coaching staff. I love their defense. I love Herbert, which I was wrong on him. I had Tua way ahead of him. In my draft rankings, so I'd be very, very blatantly obvious.
Most people were wrong with him, to defend you there, John. Yeah.
I couldn't find big time moments whenever I watched his Oregon tape. Yeah. Like literally, there were several times. I think it was the Pac-12 championship or something against USC, and there were like 9 seconds left in the game, and he threw the ball out of the back of the end zone, and that was the end of the game. It was like, dude, you never even gave your team a chance. So like, for me, my valuation was like, dude, this guy's not a gamer. Like whatever it's on the line. Wrong. I was wrong. So do I think he'll win it this year? I don't, because of the interceptions.
Yeah.
That's now, are there MVPs in Herbert's future? Yes, there are. I don't think it's this year, just because that old class, it's going to be hard. Tom Brady, they're going to give it to Tom Brady if he's even close this year. So I'm going to say no. And I wish I was wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong again.
I'm with you. I think he actually could be a runner-up. We had an article yesterday in Legit Football that mentioned that his catchable throw rate under pressure was only 57%, which means just over half the time when he's under pressure, is he throwing a ball that's actually catchable by his wide receivers. And I think that's where a lot of those turnovers came from, is actually when he was pressured, his mechanics broke down a little bit. So that's something he has to work on. I'm big on the Chargers, but I'm really big on the Bills. I have them winning the Super Bowl, and if you've got the Super Bowl winning quarterback, and he already puts up amazing numbers, both as a rusher and as a passer, while I think Herbert is going to be in the top 3 in voting, I've got Josh Allen winning for 2022. But 2023, could be Herbert's year. So I'll give
I will say this real quick. I got to say this. I hate the MVP with a passion. I really wish it was for more positions. It should be called quarterback of the year and then have an MVP who was the best against their position or something. I don't know. I hate how it's always just quarterbacks. It bothers me so much. But sorry.
So we got just over 30 seconds left. I have a quick question. You want me to just go that? I don't know if you have one that would.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm
just going to put you to who wins the NFC this year, John Chapman.
The Bucs, and I hate it, and I hate myself for saying it. But their path, their schedule's the easiest. Their roster might be the deepest. I'd say.
And who wins the Super Bowl in 2024? We're going to end on that one for you, John.
I'm going the Bills. I'm going the Bills with you. Okay. I'll go with you.
2024.
2024, who wins? Yeah. Oh, 49ers.
49ers.
Oh,
That's what I wanted to hear. That's what I was trying to get out of you, John. But yes, we're both in agreement. The Bills are going to win this year and the 49ers in the future. 30 minutes of football is up. What a great effort. John, how you feeling? You give your post-game press conference.
I'm a little wore out, man. I got to go shower down, ice bath, got to relax these muscles a little bit.
Got to watch
man,
the film.
This was awesome.
Yeah, see what we did wrong, see how we can prove next week, give 110%. John, thank you so much coming on. As always, I look forward to being on your show every single week. Make sure to check out 49ers Rush podcast, either as a podcast or on his YouTube. John, thanks for joining us, and thank you for listening. This has been 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football.